Well, I didn't know,
You start with introductions.
I just put wherever I could.
Hmm? Okay. Should we start with introductions, you think?
Sure, I'll start off. This is John Dickinson. He's the negotiator for the University of South Florida.
How are you?
Doing well. I'm Jim Gary. I'm the vice provost for, I don't know, for academic labor relations and other things.
Linda de Blasio keeping notes for me during the session. And Liz Chervellini, I'll let Olga and Sherry introduce themselves.
Liz Chervellini from the Office of General Counsel.
Olga Joanno, USF Health.
And I'm Sherry Nessheim from the HR department here at USF Tampa.
Yes, hi, my name is Hanisha. I'm a graduate student in the Department of Industrial Engineering.
Which department?
Industrial Engineering.
Oh, okay.
My name is Sam Badger. I'm a graduate student in the philosophy department.
My name is Patrick Templeton. I'm a graduate student in the English department.
My name is Zulkarnain Heather. I'm also a graduate student at Industrial Design Department.
Well, how would you like to begin?
I mean, we've got things that we'd love to cover, but if there's something you guys want to start off with,
We're anxious to hear what you have to say. And do you have any ideas about ground rules for bargaining?
Not particularly. There's some that this is mostly our first time bargaining, so we were, if you have any you'd like to establish, we'd be happy to hear them.
Let me throw out some ideas, and these are just ideas to see how you feel about them. It usually is helpful to us for us to bring our calendars to the meetings and to request the other side to do so that we can attempt at the end of the session to try to schedule the next session. Sometimes that's not possible, but if we have our calendars, it's helpful. So that would be one suggestion I would make, is that we bring our electronic calendars or whatever with us. Secondly, that we agree on the number of copies that each side wants of the proposals that are advanced at the table in writing, so that we give you however many you want for us to make. It's got to be a reasonable number, obviously. But I would suggest, for us, I think we're going to need 7 copies would be what we would prefer.
Okay.
We will 3-hole punch ours, so that if you want to keep it in a ring notebook, it's easy to do that. And we will label our proposals, and we're suggesting that you do the same. And we're going to be labeling ours in the upper right-hand corner, USS or board proposal, and we'll put the date that we give it to you at the table, so we can keep track, as we make proposals. Usually our proposals will be in the form of the language that we would propose to be added. We would underline in the text of the article, and then if there's a language that we think needs to be deleted or modified, so we would strike through the old language. That would be the way. It's up to how you want to do it, but that's the way ours would look. That way we can follow as we go through there, what we mean. We'll also attempt to number the lines so we can draw our attention to a particular line of the text. So we would ask that you consider doing that with your proposal. It's helpful to us, in order to keep track of what's been agreed upon, that we initial provisions that we've agreed upon as we do that, recognizing that it's just a tentative agreement subject to a complete ratification at the conclusion of negotiations, so that while the parties aren't necessarily bound to it, it's in the spirit of cooperation and good faith that you would intend to recommend that for ratification unless something happens at the table to change your mind, which you would notify us.
Okay.
That's usually helpful. I think the last thing is that we all have busy schedules, so sometimes we'll schedule a meeting and then something will come up, and travel or illness or something, and so I would suggest that we have a line of communication. You would communicate with me through email in as far advance as you can, if you want to cancel or reschedule something. And I guess I would direct my email to whomever you or whomever on your team that you would want it to be directed to.
Okay.
So those are just generally the guidelines that we think in the past have helped us. We will try to always make a room available. It won't necessarily be this room. It depends on availability. This is a room that is one that we've used quite often in the past for other negotiations. But we've also used another room. I think it's is that on the second floor?
It is, it's the HR training room, 2070, so we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, so we
As
may have
best
to
we
use
can
that
between
on
the two
occasion.
spaces.
It's a little bit, it's a little bit smaller
Yeah.
than this one. Those would be the ones that, the ground rules that I think you may want to consider. Do you have any questions about those at all?
No, they seem pretty straightforward.
You agree to those?
We probably will.
Best of our ability.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, why don't you let us know at some point, and then what we'll do is we'll type them up and bring them to the next meeting, and then we can initial them at that time. How's that?
We think that sounds great.
That's all we have.
Okay.
In fact, I think we already have proposals that are in that format, right?
Yeah.
Strike-throughs with,
If you've got some today that aren't in that format, that's not a problem at all.
you don't?
So we don't have anything in today for that, but we absolutely can give you that next meeting.
Yeah.
We did want to get started talking about a couple of different things. We wanted to start with what we kind of think of as one of the big things we've been dealing with, which is about timely delivery of contracts. So this is pretty much all different things having to do with Article 2. We've had a lot of issues with graduate students getting the contracts when they're supposed to be getting them, partially because there's kind of this ambiguous language with if applicable, which is put in two different parts of the contract. So it's in Part D. Article 2, they're right here for you. So the Article 2, it has if applicable twice. It basically sets up two different deadlines for each semester. One of them is kind of supposed to be seems like a softer deadline, the other one a harder deadline, but they both have if applicable after them, and it basically gives the departments kind of carte blanche to give the letters whenever they feel it's applicable. There's also really no mechanism to ensure that graduate assistants are notified when they're going to get those letters or what the process is for making sure they're going to get those letters at some point. We've had it where not only have we had graduate students who've gotten their letters after the start date of the contract, we've also had people who've been particularly harmed by this. One of the things was somebody we worked with Dr. Gary on this semester, we had two different mothers who were not notified about whether or not they were getting reappointed. As a result, they took up and bought health insurance because they were under the impression it would be subsidized. They were then, right before the start of the semester, notified that they were not going to get reappointed, and they could not undo the purchase of the health insurance. And so as a result, they had $1,000 they were suddenly having to pay that they were not originally going to pay. We actually have one of those moms here with us, and Dr. Gary helped us to try and she got the child with us with her as well. And so all we really are looking for is to try and standardize and especially make it a little bit more firm when those contracts have to be delivered, just because that really affects our graduate students, and it's kind of, we think, a simple fix on the end of the university, particularly because there are the two deadlines. So all we want to remove is the second, if applicable. So we're still okay with that first deadline for each of the semesters being left in there. We understand there's sometimes ambiguities with budgets and all those kind of things, but we'd like to remove the second, if applicable. If practicable, excuse me. And instead, we'd like to put in and basically extend the follow-up section of that and establish a procedure for if you cannot get the letter to a graduate student by the end of that second deadline, the student will be contacted by the department and basically given notice as to the reason for the delay of why they're not getting the contract and whatever information the department has to offer as to when they might be able to get that and what the delay is actually being caused. There's similar language in other contracts for GAUs like at FSU, and it's literally just kind of a better process, we think, and something that gets that contract to the student when they're supposed to, or it makes sure that they know kind of what the situation is, because right now they're kind of left in an ambiguous space.
To just add to that, there's also a lot of cascading effect. If the appointment letter comes late, then you gotta get your health insurance, and if you don't get that, then that puts a hold on your ability to register for courses, and then that puts a hold on your ability to get a fee waiver. So a lot of folks have faced these issues because they did not know when they were going to get there. And then what ends up happening is each individual tries to contact people, and then they are also overloaded at the administration's end. So something like this could actually improve the process a lot as well.
In fact, there's even cost of living, right? I mean, you've got to pay rent in a certain time period that doesn't really correspond necessarily to the job letter arrival.
Well, and as graduate students, because it's our income, if we're trying to get a lease, which is really common during the summer, that's kind of our proof that we're going to have income throughout the year. And so when we don't get that in time, it can challenge our ability to be able to secure housing before the semester starts, and in particular when it comes in as late as some of the contracts have in the last semester.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
So that's something we like to do. We'd also like to add deadlines and dates for summer contracts. So we know that not every student necessarily is applying for summer funding, but right now it only covers fall and spring semesters. And we had an issue during the term of the last contract where we were having people trying to sign up for health insurance, and they were having trouble doing that for the summer term because it was set up in a way where it was just for fall and spring. We think having deadlines for contract delivery and notification for appointment for summer would help avoid those issues as well. We'd like the term of contracts to be standardized to fit the same as the faculty, faculty 9-month term. So we had an issue specifically with one of the engineering departments where they were trying to give kind of a fake pay raise to graduate students by increasing their hourly wage, but then decreasing the term of the contract. So not only did that kind of give them a red herring raise, but it also made it so that they missed a total of 2 pay periods over the period of the year. One of those missed pay periods came in between the semesters, and it pinched a couple of students' abilities to be able to pay rent and general expenses because they're used to having that 9-month contract, and it didn't actually end up happening. We also had gone over the math in terms of the number of students who are put on 9-month appointments. The majority is supposed to be a 0.5 FTE for the 9-month. It's at like 51% right now. Like it's just barely over for the university as a whole. We'd like that to be changed so that it's per college as opposed to just for the university as a whole, because we do find typically that there are certain departments or colleges that will try to exercise more flexibility in regards to those things, and that hurts those TAs most specifically, and we'd like to try and make it so it's more standardized across the university. There's an extra paragraph space in Article 7 that's like a typo, and we'd like to remove that because it looks weird and
Red line.
we thought that would be the compromise. This is going to be a sticking point, I know, but yeah, we think that's worth removing because it looks weird.
What was the one just before that one?
So it's both standardizing the 9-month appointment rates to faculty dates. So specifically that the default for
the 9-month rate. That was
so that the default start dates for our contracts.
No, I understand that. It was the 9. It was the. I just couldn't. I was trying to write down some
Yeah,
stuff.
and then the majority for 0.5 FTE for 9 months
Yeah.
within each college as opposed to university as a whole. We'd like to add to the non-discrimination clause, and specifically adding language that covers gender identity and expression, sexual orientation, military status, because right now we have veteran status but not military status, and parental status. We'd like our grievance time for when somebody's allowed to be able to file a formal grievance to go from 30 days to 60 days, mostly because we already are required to engage in informal grievance, like trying to fix the grievance informally, and we've actually succeeded that really well with our communication with Dr. Gary. But we do find 30 days is quite a quick turnover time, particularly because people don't necessarily know who to contact. It takes time to be able to find out what their case is and then who we contact in USF to try and fix it informally. And we think that being able to have that extra time is unlikely to change the number of grievances that we file, and in fact is actually more likely to make it so that we're able to solve them mostly informally and take care of that. But so that we're not squeezed, so we're just filing grievances and making it so we have to have an extra meeting to get that filed just because it's a 30-day time.
Article 7.
So that is Article, I think it's 11.9, Step 1A. Says it in the first sentence. We think that, or excuse me, we propose that sexual harassment issues for graduate assistants, CAs, and RAs should be grievable through the formal grievance process. Right now, the policy requires that instead of that, we go through the DEO office as opposed to going through the grievance procedure. We've had a number of TAs, RAs, and GAs who have felt this process has failed them and not allowed them to actually be able to exercise this and have themselves be heard and have this worked out. And so we think it should be something that's grievable as opposed to something that has to go through the DEO. And that is 11C, I think it is, or 8.1C.
C and D.
Yeah. We'd basically be changing C and then adding a D to say explicitly that it's grateful.
What does that mean? A DOE versus a grievance or something?
Well, specifically what we're trying to do is to ensure that it's treated, in certain cases, especially with GAs and TAs, the process that is set up now is kind of more as if they are students as opposed to as employees. A lot of times, especially in the science fields, we're going to be seeing people who might have their PI, have an academic relationship with them, but then they're also a professional relationship where they're an RA, a research assistant. It's their boss. And right now, it's handled in a way through kind of more of an academic office as opposed to something where it's more of an actual labor issue related to us as employees of the university as opposed to students. And so we think handling it on that side would be better for students and employees who are one the same. Article 19.2, which is the waiver of the right to bargain. There was a court case that was decided since the last contract, which says that we do not have to include that in the contract anymore. We do not want it included in the contract.
What, is this on here? I'm looking for 19.
It's 19.2.
Is that on the sheet?
I got it printed out, but
So you're talking about, here it is.
I'm asking him.
Okay.
Where is this on this sheet?
which sheet?
19, what's your, have you gone beyond this sheet now on that one?
Oh, yeah, sorry, that didn't have
Do
everything.
you have a
That was
sheet
some of-
with any of this other stuff? I don't wanna take your only sheet if you've got an extra one there.
Sam, do you mind?
Yeah, we are actually sharing that, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
we're limited.
Can I borrow that one from you?
You're welcome.
Sure.
If
It's actually not.
you want it back later, or can I keep it?
You can
I
keep
think,
it.
Okay. Let me look for this.
It's on the bottom.
I got 11.9 extension.
it's the first one, actually.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
Like, okay, removed from the contract, waive right to bargain. Let me see 19.2. Therefore, the university and GAU during the terms of voluntary waive the right and agree that the order of the bar collective with respect to any subject or matter, whether or not personal friends with even less subject or matter. That's the zipper clause. What's wrong with that?
It's just that we do not want it in the contract, as we feel it limits some of our flexibility if issues come up that we were not aware of during the bargaining session, particularly because we're going to be going through the consolidation process over the next 3 years, and we're not certain as to the way that's going to affect our GAs and TAs, and we feel like this limits us in that regard, so we'd like to keep the ability to be able to bargain an issue if it does come up, and that prevents us from doing that.
So in other words, you want to be able to at any time demand to come to the table on any subject matter?
If there's an issue, yes. We hope that doesn't come up, but we'd like to have the ability to do so.
All right.
Going all the way back to pretty much, it's still Article 2, but it's going to be at the very beginning. There's a list of specific things that students need to be notified of when they're signing or that needs to be included in their contract for being a GA. We'd like to particularly make some edits to parts N and O. Mostly because we've had some issues where students are confused that when they sign the contract, they think that they are automatically enrolled in the union, as opposed to the idea that they still have to specifically enroll as a member of the union outright. So we'd just like to add some language that clarifies that more specifically.
What article is this?
Article 2,
Oh, this is 2.
yeah,
It's 2.1.
2.1.
Separate. And what are you wanting to do with these?
In N, we'd like to add the statement that to become a member of GIU, you can visit and then our website or contact organizing@usf.org. And then to O, we'd like to add a statement which just specifically says a statement clearly, or a statement to the effect of A statement clearly notifying the employee that consenting to the release of their email to us does not enroll them as a member of GAU, because they get a message saying that their email is going to be given to us. But again, that tends to confuse students to think that they are then automatically becoming a member of the union when that's not the case. And so we just like them to have the information to know that that's not the fact.
Language stuff.
This is for the portion of the contract that we've been talking about. And then for release time, we'd like to pretty much just kind of invert the language as it stands in the contract right now, specifically in 10.4A2. I've got it highlighted here for you right now. Right now, it states that that release time cannot reduce the workload of a TA, GA, or RA below 10 hours per week. And we basically just like to eliminate that because we think that it limits our flexibility in terms of who we can appoint as a part of release time, and particularly because we have so many people who are currently on 0.25 FTE contracts. As the numbers that we looked at before, that can take away as much as half of our current membership or unit. And we already have a clause in there that states that you can only get 5 or 10 hours of release time. So people cannot take more than that. And so for students who have the 10 hours and who'd like to be able to take release time for a semester or two, we don't think that's unreasonable, and especially given how many of our members that's the case for.
So you're talking about release for your officers?
Yes.
Union officers, okay.
Yeah. Going back to contracts and just notification, this is kind of more just a smaller point, but in part 2.5B, there's a policy about when students get notified if they are going to have a change in appointment as a result of certain documented circumstances. Right now, students are only going to get 2 weeks written notice for a change of appointment in the case of either unsatisfactory performance of assigned duties or lack of funds as a result of adverse financial conditions. We'd like to add on to that notification in the events of parts 2 and 5, namely the unsatisfactory performance in coursework and or progression towards degree and the completion of degree requirements. We've had students who felt that they've been working towards the degree and the progress has been fine, but their department interpreted that in a different way and or they had a different interpretation of that. And so we'd like students just to be able to be formally notified if there is an issue from the department so that they can work through that and or just be aware of it. Now, mostly because it's already included in there that that's something that could affect their contracts, we'd just like notice of that if that is the case.
Talk about healthcare.
Yeah, what do we want to talk about? Is there anything you all want to respond to in terms of any of that? Or we also have other issues that are more related to financial matters. We know that Dr. Gary talked about there is a level of ambiguity because the state session is going on right now. We'd at least like to kind of talk about those issues just to start off with. And kind of just discuss those more generally. That's okay?
We're fine with dividing between economic and non-economic, although some of this may be economic. We'll have to go back and look at it. I think before we can respond, we're gonna, if we could maybe get it from you in the format that we discussed as a ground rule. That way, there's no breakdown in communication. I think that would help us.
That'd be great.
And once we get that from you, maybe you could ship it to me in an email, and then we can confer and then respond. How's that?
We'd be okay with that. We pretty much have the language prepared, and so I can get it to you by,
Sounds like you did it.
by next week.
I can't, I'm just not quick enough to follow all of it.
It's a couple of things. I'll start with the extra paragraph getting eliminated, and then go from there.
Make it simple.
Let's make it simple. So yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
You know what KISS means, K-I-S-S?
Yes.
Okay, that's what we want you to do.
Would you guys like to get us started for the financial issues? Or who wants to get started? Sam?
I can get us started on parental leave. So, I've seen the plan that was written up by Dr. Barr in regards to parental leave. This was something that she was considering among others. She said it was incomplete. and she hadn't been able to work out all the kinks, and she wasn't sure if it was going to be implemented. Parental leave is an issue that is particularly close to my heart, I guess, because my wife and I just had our baby. It would have been nice to be able to take parental leave, but I couldn't. We have other moms and other people in other departments who are in similar situations, and the gist of Ruth Barr's proposal was 6 weeks, which is fairly standard, although there's maybe some issues with that. 6 weeks of parental leave with health insurance paid, but with no stipend. It's an unpaid parental leave. And for the most part, it seems decent. It seems like in line with a lot of other universities, but of course, I would like to see it be paid, because if you're, a new parent, you have a child, this is pretty expensive. You have to get the new child on the university health insurance, and that costs a certain amount of money. So when you buy the, Gallagher, UHC, whatever it is, the health insurance, it's going to cost you whatever remainder of the year for that individual. And so if your baby's born in February, say as mine was, that means I have to pay 4/10 of the year of, or the 9 month, I guess, 2 semesters of health insurance, right? I have to pay that up front to the health insurance company. And of course, we need money to do that with. Stipends would help with that, right? Pay off those credit card debts for when we are, buying our baby health insurance on the plan that the university has to offer us. And there may be, of course, other medical issues, right, that new parents have. In addition, you have to buy a whole bunch of new stuff to take care of your baby. So the idea that the parental leave would be unpaid is just, I think, not realistic with what new parents face. And I have seen the proposals of other universities, or the system set up by other universities in other bargaining sessions and other contracts, and they are often paid, especially in the most, high-tier universities. And I think that, Harvard, well, maybe not Harvard, I can't remember which universities it was. I said to Dr. Gary a while ago.
Public university.
I think some of them are public, yeah. Some of them are public, some of them are private, but a lot of them did have paid parental leave, and I think that that's something which would be nice to guarantee. The other major change that I added to the university proposal is based on the hard reality that often childbirth for a new mother is not something that is going to be medically resolved after 6 weeks. For instance, if you had a C-section and you've got to go teach 7 weeks after your C-section, that's pretty difficult. So I added a clause about possibly extending it 2 weeks with medical necessity, because I think that there are mothers who face medical situations. It may also be for fathers or mothers if the baby has some particular illness, or if it's a preterm baby, right? You have new challenges to face that other mothers wouldn't. And of course, this would only be with medical necessity. It would only be a couple weeks more, but I think it would be a useful respite, right, for mothers in those situations. So, I don't know if you guys have seen Ruth Barr's write-up. It's pretty decent other than those
We
2 points.
discussed it in the
but-
graduate student success, I think, but I
We
haven't
did,
actually
I remember that.
spent any time to read the copy that she said. I have no idea, and that's not part of the collective bargaining process. That's just maybe an idea that she had to do. So she-
Yeah, well, and one of the other things that we also were trying to address with that as well is kind of there's some inequity in terms of the way that people are able to find a way to take parental leave, because the clause hasn't been in there before. And so depending on the way that their either boss or their coworkers are able to help cover some of the work that they're doing while they're able to take care of the child, if you end up in the right department with the right boss, you might be able to see your kid more. If you happen to be in the wrong place or you don't have connections with people around you, you have a hard time with that, and that kind of inequality between those workspaces we think is something that needs to be addressed, because your ability to see your child shouldn't just be dependent upon do you happen to be in the right department and do you have the right boss. You want to feasibility or is open?
That's in actually Ruth Barr's proposal. It doesn't have to be a biological parent. So if it's an adopted child, obviously you want to get to know this new child, but before you start taking care of it. or foster child or something like that, that was included in her proposal. And I basically just took her proposal as a blueprint and just added a few changes to make it, I think, stronger for graduate students in that situation. And I think it is an issue we take seriously. It's also about gender equality. It's about success for graduate students, right? Because if you're bringing in some of the brightest graduate students in the country, they happen to have a child, you don't want to basically undermine this great academic potential career because they happen to have a child. It's just like a fate of circumstance.
Who would be the eligible people for that policy?
Mothers or fathers, legal mothers or fathers of a biological or adoptive or foster child.
You mean in terms of FTE or?
What if you had both working at Castile University?
Then I think they would
Yeah.
both be eligible.
But we have in our language that it would, both parents wouldn't be able to take leave at the same time. They would have to do it.
Oh.
Maybe when we get to economic, this is economic, maybe you could put something in writing and exactly define it, and then let us see what you're talking about.
We'd be happy to do that.
And the one thing I would like to add to this is that we have teaching assistants and research assistants are paid off federal money, so it might be way more complicated than you think.
This is actually something I've been considering because I remember this actually came up in the case of the mother and her fellow graduate student, right? One who is here. How was he, by the way? Congratulations, also. That if a professor leaves to another university, the student loses grant funding, and this is a problem. And we're interested in hearing proposals from the university in ways in which to ensure against that, although it's not
No,
an
I
issue we
wasn't
wanted to
talking about-
focus on today.
I was
but-
actually talking about let's say we had a parental leave policy for GAs. The money that's paid to GAs that are teaching is state money that comes from the state, and there's
Mhm.
certain rules for that. Federal money that pays an RA comes from a federal grant that has strings attached. And so
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that the rules on what a PI could do in terms of parental leave for a part-time employee might be very different from what USF might agree to do. So it might be more complicated, than that might be something to think about. And I'm not sure how that would all work out, but it's not as simple as I think,
Yeah.
as I think you think, so.
Oh, I know it's complicated, but and I know there's a lot of like financial issues that codes and rules that have to be followed that
They're called
can-
laws,
Yeah.
federal
yeah.
laws.
Yeah,
We'll-
but
What we can do is look up some of the language from the public universities and see how they drafted it for both teaching and research assistants and go off based on that.
And we'll be happy to take a look and see what exactly the
I
regulations.
just wanted to point that out because, I
and
have
if you
fun.
guys have any ideas for how to resolve that problem, that'd be great. I'd actually really like to see that.
Because I think that's also something that was affected in the engineering situation where the TAs got a raise and the RAs did not. And they both worked the same amount of hours and they did not get a raise and they did have a cut in the pay period. So they got lesser than what they were supposed to. So I think that was a very good point that you raised, and we should definitely take a look into what we can do to resolve that.
And we'd be happy to write in language that tries to take that into account as well. So. Fees? Whatever you'd like to do.
Yeah, so we would also like to, talk on the stipends, and there are two main issues that we are interested in. So firstly, already, in the current contract, so for the next 3 years, we decide what the pay raises or increases will be, and what will be the.
For minimum stipends.
For the minimum stipend for 0.5 FTE, and then the rest of it is basically prorated according to how many hours are you working. So we would like to continue with that and negotiate on some pay raises that are the exact numbers we could come up with later. But the more important thing is the current discrepancy between the stipends for master's and PhD graduate assistants. And both of them, if they work the same amount of time, 0.5 FTE, one could be paid the minimum of $12,500 for 9 months of work, which is really low. Excuse me. And for PhDs, the minimum currently is $17,830. So there's approximately a 42% discrepancy between master's student and PhD graduate assistants. And since master's students are not really a huge chunk of our constituents, so we would like that the university and the union should make efforts to bridge this gap. So we support equal pay for equal amount of work. And we've also noticed that such discrepancy does not exist to this glaring level in other similar contracts in other preeminent universities. So that's something that is very important in terms of stipends, and of course, year-over-year increase is also something that we would like to negotiate, and we have some proposals for that, similar to what the past practice has been.
Well, we'll be anxious to see what you have on that. I think when it comes to economic stuff, we're just not in a position right now to be, able to know what we're gonna be able to do financially. So that's gonna be down the road for that. We will get those from you in writing, I guess, at some point.
Right, yeah.
Whatever you want to put in there. Thank you. Was there anything else?
So, in terms of stipends, so there's, of course, the difficult financial situation that we are aware of, but also students go through a lot of difficult situation as well. And many find it difficult to make it through the year with rents and medical expenses. And then there's inflation with groceries, with rents, especially in this area in USF. There has not been a lot of development, so many graduate assistants find it difficult. And we have heard a lot of testimonials with their current stipend levels. So we would like to negotiate an increase in that.
Well, we'll be negotiating over wages, hours, and working conditions, and stipends is a wage. So, we'll be talking about that. My point was that right now, while we're fine getting it from you, it's gonna be a while before we're gonna be in a position to really, have a meaningful discussion over economic matters, given our situation. That's all I'm saying.
Talk about fee relief. So one of the issues, obviously, we're talking about stipends, getting more money from the university, and one of the strange things about being a graduate student is, as well as getting money from the university, you also have to pay money to the university at the beginning of the year. This is really weird, kind of like a in one hand, out the other kind of thing, like getting money from the university, pay the university back. And it would be nice to see some relief to these fees. Other public universities in Florida have also gotten fee relief. It's just a reduction in the fees we have to pay, because it just seems at face value to be absurd that at the start of a semester we have to pay this money and then the university's gonna pay it back, a little bit back to us. It's seems like a kind of a backdoor way of giving us more money, right?
And especially there are particular fees that we take issue with. One of the biggest ones is the classroom fee, because we have TAs like me who have to pay to access classrooms that I'm teaching in, so the thing that I need to do my job, I'm paying for. And then there are research assistants or PhD students who are in the latter parts of their degree who don't step foot in classrooms because what they're doing is doing research. And so they're paying money for things that they're not utilizing, or which is tautologically needed for them to be able to perform their job responsibilities. And so those kinds of fees don't seem like something that we should be continuing. Fees generally, as Sam was saying, already seem like a difficult thing. For me particularly, or as an example, not particularly, I promise won't get rid of everybody. For the amount of money that I'm paid by the university, before taxes, I pay back 12% of that just in fees over the course of 9 months. Before I get to pay my rent, before I get to buy food, I'm paying back more than 10% of my stipend, and that's above what the minimum is for master's students like me. If I was on the minimum, that would be verging on 15% of my stipend is going back immediately to the university for something that's already well below the poverty line and is something that's incredibly difficult to live off of, particularly for 12 months. And so that's something that we think, even with the uncertainty about what the budget is something the university could look at and address to be able to help give graduate students and all graduate students, regardless of how much they're being paid, relief in terms of the actual amount of money they're able to keep for the work that they do and that they're paid by the university.
And just to add to that, a small point about the timing of these fees. So they are in the beginning of each semester when folks are really, getting their legs on the ground. They have to pay rents, and basically $800 is sort of a paycheck that you don't get.
It's the size of
like
your first stipend,
yeah,
basically.
Well,
it's a gap
and
for 2 weeks that,
And in particular, because of the contract issues that we've talked about, where if you are not able to get the delay in graduate fees, where it's supposed to go to week 8 or week 10, if you don't get that because the contract doesn't deliver on time, then you are having to pay that up front, and that's money that some graduate students just don't have, especially in that amount.
So we're paying rent and,
Your colleagues, in years past have raised similar issues. It's all part of the economic package and what we can do, and where we can use the resources. But we understand your point, because we hear it.
And then we want to talk about healthcare too. Again, we understand it's under economics, but we like to talk about it just to get it started.
well, the biggest thing in healthcare, or the most immediate thing at least, is the fact that in the contract right now, unless you want to talk about it. No.
Well, in the contract, we have a certain amount of premium that was supposed to be covered, and in the past it was said that the GA body has not exceeded or needed to exceed that amount of premium, and in this year we have exceeded that premium, or in the past, it's in the past year.
It started this
and-
year,
and-
yeah.
So we are, there's an additional $159 worth of amount that is being taken from the paycheck directly. And so instead of having a premium, it would be better if we had a percentage of coverage and said that we would cover 100% of the premium. I think that would be,
Because we'd raised that our leadership had raised that in previous bargaining and had been told it's not a big deal because it has not exceeded that amount before, and as a result, the fact that it's a number as opposed to a percentage is not something that we should worry about. And now that we've actually had it where it's exceeded and we've had to pay $160 out of pocket, now we'd like that to be more directly addressed, particularly with a full subsidy as opposed to just a mathematical number that we're hoping it doesn't go above, but that as far as we know, next year it could be exceeded, and we're all 3 years of the contract, students
Yeah.
still have to pay out of pocket.
Yeah, I was talking to one of the previous presidents of GAU, actually two of them, Aaron and Megan Flocken, and they said that the university told them that the notion that the insurance company would raise the premium above what the university pays is a hypothetical, right?
That's not,
And it became a reality,
that's
right?
really not a fair representation. I happened to be at the table with Megan when we
Okay.
talked about this, and of course she agreed to the provision that's in there. You, the GAU, agreed, and we ratified that agreement. What do you happen to have historically how the cost has gone up to the university? Do you have any idea what the cost of insurance has been to the university over the years? Do you have that information?
I was.
I'm sure you would be interested.
Yeah, I do have some familiarity, but if you want to refresh our memories.
Okay. Will you then recognize the cost that this university's absorbed in the increased cost of coverage?
Yeah, but the flip side of that is that then students who are sick or ill are having to absorb increased costs, because actually the health insurance plan got worse, right? So we're having to pay more for prescription, we're having to pay more up front for the healthcare we do receive. And in addition, we'll also have to pay up front at the beginning of the semester. And if you have dependents like I do, I have to pay the full premium for both dependents, like my wife and my child. I had to spend about almost $6,000 this year between myself, my child, and my wife. And that's a lot of money considering that, you know, I'm on a stipend of about almost 18,000, right? So then, you know,
Yeah, I guess
that entails loans and all the other shenanigans. So I didn't mean to
I
interrupt.
didn't interrupt you, I thought you were finished.
No, I'm done now. I'm sorry.
There was a lengthy and healthy discussion in 2016 when we were at the table last over insurance. We pulled together a lot of resources and data on insurance. And we need to, when we get into economics, we'll get into the weeds on this. When we get your proposal, we'll look at it, but the fact of the matter is, insurance is costly. The university has absorbed, you know, a lot of the costs, all the costs in the past up till the reason of this. And we came to accord with the GAU over some relief to the university. What I think I'm hearing you say is that you want to go back on that now and change and reverse what we agreed to in 16. Is that right?
Well, I think we
I don't have
should
your proposal, but it sounds like it.
go to 100% is the.
We'll look at your
It's not a
proposal.
reversal.
It was kind of sounding like that
It's not-
without seeing it. So maybe it's unfair for me to say that until I see it, okay? And I'll,
I wouldn't be changing the language, at least, but it would have an economic impact on the university, for sure.
We're
we'll
trying,
see what you got.
we feel this is concurrent with the position of our previous board, but that the pushback that they got was that it was because it was a hypothetical, that what they ideally wanted at 2016 was not feasible or was not something to be followed through on.
You know, no one has, and we express that at the table, crystal ball, what's gonna happen. We don't know. We don't know what it's gonna be until we get the figures, where they are. So if you wanna call that, it's a hypothetical, I guess the inference is that what I'm hearing you maybe communicate is that this university at the bargaining table was indicating that we didn't think it would ever happen. And so it's a doubtful hypothetical. That's really not what was expressed. What we tried to express at the table, and we would do it again this year, is that we never know what it's gonna be. We don't have lengthy projections as to what that cost will be. The university gets it, and you know, we have to pay for it. So, yeah, is it a guess that it'll happen or not? Absolutely, we don't know. And that's for any employer that I negotiate for around the country. I mean, you just never know on insurance what's going to. Now, even if you're self-insured, totally, you don't know, because you don't know what your experience is going to be in the prior year. And it depends on your, you know, on the demographics, the makeup of the people covered and all. So, but I don't want there to be any feeling that this university, when we were at the table, misled GAU in any way.
Oh, I don't think that was the implication.
Okay.
I didn't mean to.
We didn't do that.
No,
We
no.
didn't do that, and we did express, and we are gonna continue to express, because it's a fact that we never know what it's gonna be. You know, and that's something that's given us based on experience, and no one knows what the experience is gonna be. You know, do you know what the average increase has been on coverage in the nation for health coverage?
We can look that up.
Well, that's the
I know it
kind of
hasn't been
data,
good,
that's
but-
the kind of data that we can
Yeah.
pull together, and you can see, because I think the quarrel may be, well, you know, the percentage that we see an increase is way out of whack with national average. And if it is, then we need to look at that. If you've got that information, when you have it, provide it to us and we'll look at it, you know? I'd be a little bit surprised if you'll find that be the case. But I don't wanna, look, I'm not a naysayer, I'm not trying to throw cold water on your notion. That insurance is expensive, it's something that everyone has to be concerned with and cost, and we understand that. But our university's pretty proud of what we've done in the past with insurance, we really are. And we were proud back then at 16, I don't think anything's changed.
I mean, I was certainly happy when I got here and I got fully paid for insurance.
Yeah,
I just.
well, you know, but there's a national debate on health insurance, as you know. I mean, and we could spend days and days on that topic and really not get a whole solution to that. But it is all part of the package of economics and what this university can do. And that will all be fleshed out maybe when we get into that, because you got a lot of non-economic stuff. And I would suspect that this would be, months from now before we get into that. We're not gonna be really in a position, I would think, until May at the best to really get into the economic part of it. I think this contract expires in August. So we're really talking about something that would take effect after that day. So, I would think that,
Be August 7th.
yeah, August 7th. So I would think that if we could get into economics, May or June or something like that, would be really when we're gonna be able to do that, roll up our sleeves with you on those.
I mean, I know a lot of that has to
So
do
we won't be
with,
spinning our wheels.
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanna say, I know a lot of that's on the state.
It is,
And-
it is,
yeah.
it is. Now, we're hopeful because the legislature started a little sooner this year. It was last week, that when they started.
Yes, January 2nd.
That maybe we'll get, some information sooner, and that'll be helpful for everybody. And, once we get that, then we can really dig in, to economics. But I didn't mean to throw cold water on what you were saying. I understand what you're saying.
I mean, what I think, I mean, just add that the premise on which this language was created no longer holds, so the language needs to be kind of changed to adjust to that. It was based on the premise that we would not, and not to say that you were misleading or.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that was not communicated in a way that I've heard, and I was there, and we are not deceptive. This university, when we give you information, it's the truth.
Oh, we have never, I'm
Yeah,
sorry to interrupt.
yeah, please
never,
believe that, because we have no
insinuated
reason to try to, I mean, our credibility is really important to us. I know yours is to you. And when we say something, we mean it, and we never suggested that we don't think this will ever happen. We just didn't know. We don't know. And I'll tell you, we won't know in the future what's going to happen. So.
I think which is why the 100% ensures that in the future, if any changes would not reflect poorly, within a span of 3 years, right? I think that's every 3 years we come to the bargaining table with a different notion. So for the next 3 years to ensure that 100% is covered would be safe to say that any changes would not reflect poorly on GA's health.
Okay. Thank you.
We also have dental and optic ideas, so we would like to see that covered in the contract, because it's currently offered, but you have to pay for it. And if you're a student with glasses, that's an inequality, right? It is in a way discriminatory for people who need glasses to see. I don't have to pay that money.
Sam,
I'm good.
just to let you know, all the employees at USF have to pay for those
Oh yeah?
those plans.
So it would be great if the GAs had the best contract of all, and we can brag to all the other employees. Because we got optic, and we also get dental, right? Which is also something that,
I want to go back to
needing
the
teeth cleaning.
healthcare and ask John the question. John, do they pay, the amount they pay, that we pay plus they pay, is that the full amount?
No.
That's the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
There's a big amount
Yes.
that the university pays
Oh, yes.
for your insurance that isn't reflected in that amount.
That's right.
And that's kind of what I wanted to come back to a little bit, to understand that there's this much that the university is paying and you're never asked to pay, and then there's the little bit at the end that you were asked to pay.
That's right.
So
It's
just so you, I just want to bring that up, because it sounds, that makes it a little bit different.
And I would also point out that amount, $159, is 1% of my pre-tax income, whereas USF's budget is $1.8 billion, and I can't tell you how much you pay for healthcare off the top, but I don't have $1.8 billion, and I wish, I know, right? I promised I would have bought you something really nice before bargaining if I had $1.8 billion. But I don't, and so we appreciate that that USF pays for health insurance. They pay a lot of money. but that even that small amount that students have been that we've gotten so many emails just about that small amount. We've gotten more emails about that than anything else just from this last semester in fall because of the fact that people notice that and because it's significant for them, because of their wages and because of the fact that they've had it covered previously and now suddenly they're
Yeah, they're all
parts of that
confused.
cost.
With like,
Well,
what is
anyway, I just
payment
wanted to
coming
place
from?
this amount that you pay in the context of what is actually paid.
So the $159 is what we pay for like upfront, but then there's deductibles and if any of
And
us
those
did get
went-
sick and go to the doctors, as I did last year, I'm still getting the bills and I get them like every other week and it's like $700 for something and then $300 for some other visit. And as a student, and I've seen this for other students as well, fellow students, it's not just $159, but if you do get sick, then it's hundreds and thousands of dollars sometimes.
It's not just students, it's everybody.
It's everybody.
U.S.
So-
health insurance is awful, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's a systemic problem, but unfortunately, we can't solve that at the bargaining
but
table.
we bear the cost of it. I think is just the
You know, what's interesting about one of your proposals is that, well, it's always good, I think, and it's healthy, this is the time for you to ask. You know, reopen it, it's the time for both parties to advance proposals, for you to propose what you feel like you need to have, this is the time to do it. And for us to do the same. But under one of your proposals, which would be to eliminate the zipper clause, it's not just this time, it's any time. Your proposal would basically suggest that anytime you could say, I want to bargain and I want to change X, Y, or Z things that we agreed to at the table, so that this isn't necessarily, if you were to agree to your proposal on that this wouldn't be the time you could ask it any time. Whenever you woke up in the morning and you decided that, wow, let's go to the table on X, Y, or Z, you could ask for it and actually demand it. And then we'd have to go through costly, time-consuming negotiation. So, I don't know, we've got to think about that proposal.
I mean, it isn't good
The
for
ramifications to you as well as to us, because we could do the same thing. We could basically agree to something and then say, wow, that was too costly. We should have never agreed to that. And then demand that you go back to the table and we change it and take it away. So I'm just suggesting to you to really consider that zipper cost proposal that you put on the table, because I don't encounter that. That's the first time, because I've really experienced where, negotiators on both sides of the aisle know the value of that clause. Okay?
We feel very strongly about it. We looked it over and we discussed it with our parent union. We understand, and we'll be happy to take a look at it again. But for now, we're happy with the idea of it not
Yeah.
being there because
Yeah.
I don't drink coffee, so my mornings are pretty stable. Usually, I pretty much don't want to show up to anything out of the ordinary like that. It's just because, especially with the way of consolidation, leaves a lot of uncertainty in the future. We also do not have a crystal ball to know what's going to happen, and we don't necessarily want to be able to utilize those kind of things, but we do think it's important for us to be able to retain that right, and we now have the ability to do so.
What kinds of things do you expect to change with consolidation related to the graduate student?
I don't have a specific thing. The crystal ball is very cloudy right now. It's just that we don't know what exactly is going to be happening with it. It's kind of an unprecedented thing. It's involving a tremendous amount of bureaucracy and students, faculty, all sorts of different moving parts. We'd like to be able to just have that ambiguity not sealed in with the contract. It's something we just can't predict.
It's worth pointing out that there have been cases, like the engineering case that we've discussed in detail, where particular departments have decided to misuse the language of the contract to do something that, is not really acceptable. So, in that case, the contract says that 50% of the university of graduate students in unit have to have 19.5 pay periods, right? And they said that, well, we're not 50% of the graduate students, so we could just put all of our graduate students on less than that, right? And it's clearly an abuse of the language, and it got dealt with. But in cases like that, we might need to, revisit some of the language.
Yeah, but Sam, that's why you have a grievance procedure. And that's why every contract under law has to have a grievance procedure that ends in binding arbitration. So that if this university, violates the terms of the agreement, that's the remedy, not through bargaining, it's through the grievance procedure. And, you know, you get your remedy and relief through that procedure. And that was the contemplation of the way bargaining was supposed to work.
But I think the point there was it was an abuse of certain language in the contract that went clearly against the spirit of the contract. And, you know, the university luckily agreed with us that that was beyond the pale, but we you know, might need
But that's why you have
to-
a grievance procedure. I guess that, what I'm hearing you say is that you raised that issue as a concern, and it was resolved. And that's the way it's supposed to work.
But if you
Now-
also look though, we're actually changing the language in the contract because of that case, so,
Well, that's
even
what
though
you-
there was a
you're
grievance
proposing
procedure
to do
that,
aren't you? You're proposing to do
yeah.
that. And we'll address that at the table. But what I'm saying is, and you know, I don't wanna belabor this point, but I come back to that one proposal that you put on the table, cause it's so unusual that, of course, you're gonna think about it some more. And I ask that you do that, cause that is a non-bargaining, I mean, that's a non-economic subject matter. And, I think that proposal is one that could have, you know, ramifications that may not be intended for both people, for both this side of the aisle and your side of the aisle. Okay, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm talking about. Anything else that you propose? And you can propose
yeah.
later other stuff. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just today. I mean, any meeting we have, you can propose anything you want.
We were thinking of eliminating the strike clause in the contract, the no strike clause. I
The strike
think it's
clause.
based in, because of Florida law that says that
Something called
public.
state law.
It is in state law, but then why is it necessary in the contract? Our thought at least is, hypothetically speaking, you know, not that we're wanting to go on strike or anything like that, we have no reason to, but hypothetically speaking, if Florida changed its law, it seems like then, you know, the contract would no longer have that legal necessities. And so if it is in state law, then why do we need it, right? So
We
it
need
seems
that
to.
in there, and we will propose to remain there so that we make sure that we have a contractual remedy as well as a statutory remedy if it's violated. Okay? The statute has a remedy, 447-509, I believe, Florida statutes.
Yeah, well, I know there's a
So
Florida
then-
law on the matter that says that we can't go on strike, and of course, we're not proposing that we break the law.
It's the
Let
right
me just say
Right.
this too, there's also a
But-
law that says you can't discriminate, isn't it? But yet you want a discrimination, in fact, you want to expand the discrimination provision, don't you? So why do we need a discrimination section in the collective bargaining agreement if it's already?
I think that's
law?
different though,
Tell me
because
why it's
it-
different.
because we're talking about discrimination in the workplace according to the rules of the contract, and we're trying to.
I don't understand the distinction. That's in other words, tell me, it's a statutory relief, both in state and federal law on non-discrimination, isn't there?
Yeah, but
Do
there's
you
no,
agree-
but
do you
we
agree?
want to be able to take that to a grievance procedure.
Just like we want to
right?
be able to have relief under our contract for no strike.
Would you file I mean, is that the mechanism that the university needs to deal with that kind of situation, a
What-
grievance?
do
It
you
doesn't
think
seem
you
like
really-
the.
I think you really need the non-discrimination if you got remedy elsewhere.
I don't think
you
the
know, I don't
analogy
think
works.
you're not convincing me that there's a difference in your logic. Of course, you're a philosopher,
You know?
I'm not, but it just seems to me,
Well, I think the analogy doesn't work, because what we want is language about discrimination in the contract so that we can use the grievance procedures to deal with cases of discrimination. I don't think that that the university needs a grievance procedure to deal with strikes. They can use the legal procedure. And, you know, if we did have the legal right to strike, then we could talk about that in the next contract.
I would also question whether or not the Florida state discrimination clause would be the same as the one that we're actually proposing.
oh, so you want to go beyond law?
Not necessarily, but I
Tell
mean
me
that.
how- whether you are or not, I need to know.
Well, but no, so the difference would be is that the strike clause would basically just be a replication of state law, whereas we would have something different, which is why we would feel it's necessary to put it into the contract, because it's different than law, whereas the thing that's in our contract right now in regards to strikes is the exact same
And
thing.
also it's worth pointing out actually that if the state of Florida were ever to change the law on discrimination and it wasn't in the contract, let's say you get a bunch of
Same
people who
thing with
don't
no
like
strike.
X group of
It'd be
people.
the same thing with no strike. I'll.
But I think discrimination is very different than going on strike, right? This is like a moral offense about discriminating against someone because they're homosexual or because they're a woman or because of their race, that I mean, I would argue does not exist with people going on strike. It's not a morally offensive act for people to go on strike. It's not something that is a greater injustice. On the contrary, it might be a response to a particular injustice. And it's something that we at least hypothetically think is a basic right for workers, whether or not it's the state agrees. And of course, we want to follow state law, but.
I'm not smart enough to realize the distinction yet. Let me think about it some more.
Okay. We can talk about it later.
Okay.
You know, it doesn't have to
Probably
be
next
resolved,
Friday.
yeah.
I just need to think about it some more after I have some more coffee.
With sugar.
Early in the morning.
For college students, I
I used to tell my students I like to drink grapefruit juice in the morning before I grade their papers, because it put me in the proper sour mood.
Anything else you guys want to cover?
I think you covered our bases. I mean, we'll bring
Yeah,
more issues later.
We'll be able to give you written proposals as to the contract language.
Yeah, whenever
that
you
we have.
can.
Is there a particular email that you have, or can I grab the
There's my
from you?
card, and you can, just email it to that address, and then why don't we do this, rather than schedule our next one today, let's wait till we get yours, let us look at it, and I'll shoot you some ideas on dates. You can run it through your committee, and then get back with us.
So I've got my calendar here actually, so I've already kind of accidentally went a little bit psychic, and I can tell you when I'm available, and I think so we could as well.
You
so
can
we'd
go
be
ahead and
happy.
you can tell me what dates, and then we'll get back with you on those, okay?
Okay. Do you guys have your availability as well? I mean, since
A
you know,
month from today
Well, I
would
mean, we
work.
kind of because we started this conversation by saying it'd be good to be able to not have that fall through the cracks of communication, and especially once we get into the land of email where
I know.
things can kind of fall away.
We also
so.
had a discussion about having our proposals in writing, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I'm only so
So look,
I'm only
let's
so
go.
psychic.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm suggesting to you, to be productive here, you get us your written proposals as soon as you can. We'll shoot you some days. Okay? And then the next, I'm also gonna provide to you the written ground rules for you to look at. And assuming they're still good, we'll sign off on those. And we'll really be able to, address your proposals once we get them in writing. We had a chance to really, my teammates didn't have any of this. They're hearing you talk, and I'm trying to write down as fast as I can and follow you, and so are they.
I wrote 2 pages of undecipherable notes.
So,
We'll help you
At least you
decipher
can
that.
read
I think
'em.
it'd be more productive to do it that way, okay? Just this one meeting.
I mean, I'm totally okay with that. It's just, I think just like scheduling the time, I'm not sure why it's commensurate, because I will email this to you within 48 hours where you can look it over, and I don't think we had 8 to 9 proposals that are pretty minimal, and I think like even just scheduling a meeting a month out, that doesn't seem like a really tremendous rush, and I just think it seems like that would be really productive as well.
We do want to meet in February for sure.
Especially because we
With
I
talk.
want to meet in February.
Well, especially because, as you talked about, the ambiguities with our schedules, that something might come up where the meeting that we even scheduled today could suddenly be rescheduled and pushed back to March. And just the idea that even just having a date there that we can work around and be able to discuss an email, to have something where we know we're available to get started, if that changes, it'd just be great to have that to work with, because I don't think it prevents us from doing anything else. And
Tell you what, give me the dates, and I'll shoot you what we accept over the weekend.
Okay.
Is that a compromise?
That sounds
That's our
great.
first compromise, isn't it?
We started well. It's good to do that in
How
the first one, right?
For a reason.
Very cool. Do you want to go to calendar quickly? Yeah, a month from today is not gonna work for me because I'm at a Greek conference.
Oh,
So,
3 weeks.
2 weeks from today, does that work? Can we go with that, 21st? Start at the- or it's March.
21st is gonna be hard for me.
So, It doesn't necessarily have to be a Friday, correct?
Just give me what days you wanna give me, we'll discuss them in training here.
Okay.
About 18, 19 to 20.
I would be good with either do it with 19th or 20th, yeah.
I could do 19th or 20th,
February 19th and February 20th. How many dates would you like us to give you?
or actually 19th.
As many as you want to.
Let's do 19th.
February 19th and 20th, maybe we could start February 19th and 20th as the two days to look at when it started.
We'll let you know, thank you.
We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you all.
Very nice to meet you.
Yes, sir.
I'm so disappointed in one of the time. I promised everybody